Welcome to Read and Revolt. So for this episode, I am joined by Charlie Metz, Kara McLean, and Terry Scott. And we did something a little different this time. So there were 2 books chosen by our shared shelf on Goodreads. And as you know, we're reading everything they assigned to us. And so this time we actually decided to read both books. We've never tried that before. So Kara and I read Whose Story Is This? And then I read, along with Terry and Charlie, Cinderella Liberator as well. Both fantastic books, so if you read one, then you can follow along. If you read both, even better. So yeah, let's just go ahead and let's dive right in. So we're going to talk about Whose Story Is This first?
This book is really written from a perspective, at least in my opinion, of throughout our lives and throughout our schooling, the things that we've learned and the stories that were told, from whose point of view was the story told. Mm-hmm. And the book takes the perspective that it's actually written from, historically, most stories are written and told through the eyes of a straight, white Protestant male. And so when you go think about it back through history, that's pretty much how history is written.
She talked about how we are all living in these invisible cathedrals that are made of perspectives and ideas by people who've shaped our assumptions. And I just thought that was really interesting because, I mean, we forget that we're in these. And she also talked along with that, the whole idea of the alarm clock. And I have this quote, and this was one of my favorites, and it was like one of the first in the chapter. If you think you're woke, it's because someone woke you up. Or so think the human alarm clocks. And I just thought that was really interesting because I started thinking about like my journey to becoming woke, I guess, which maybe I'm not completely woke. I don't know. I guess I'm still on that journey, probably. Hopefully we're all still on the journey.
We should all still be on that journey.
I don't think there's really an end to the journey. No. I think that you should continue that. But I started thinking about just like how, like what those cathedrals looked like for me, 10 years ago and to the place that I am now. And I was just kind of interested, like what's everybody's journey what has that been like? Has that been, what kinds of cathedrals do we all come from?
From me, the perspective of, I'm married now. I've been married for, it'll be 7 years soon. And the relationship that I have with my husband is completely different than any other relationship I've ever been in, because up until probably my mid-20s, I always thought that in a relationship, my job was to make the other person happy. I never really thought of we should be making each other happy, because that's what I saw. Even though my mom is a very independent woman, in my family, my dad worked, my mom stayed at home. So in my mind, it was women sacrifice for the people that they're with to enable them to be their better selves. And I did not understand that that's not actually like a completely healthy relationship. It wasn't until I was older when I was like, all of this really sucks. That finding someone who we sacrifice for each other so that both of us are happy. And even like beyond just relationships, but even just the history we're taught in school. I grew up in El Paso, which is predominantly Mexican, and I happen to be Mexican. The history that we were being taught in school didn't match up to anything that I actually saw in real life. The entire history of Texas and Mexico was 2 chapters. And looking back on it, I was like, there was so much more.
Right. And that's not the first time that history has come up on the episode either. And I've been really fascinated by just history in general and like how we learn it in high school. And I mean, I've shared this before, but like we had football coaches teaching history, and it was like memorize facts, or watch a video. It's so much more empowering to be able to make decisions based off of what you know from history, and that's something that she also talks about in the book as well. That we're just not looking at enough history, and we're not making informed decisions.
Prime example: the Alamo. The Alamo is a story about a white man who came from Tennessee to save the people in Texas. But what part of it that's not acknowledged is that Texas was part of Mexico. Mm-hmm. Right. So the white man came and took something from the Mexicans, and he celebrated for it. But the white man came and saved everybody. It was fine.
Right. Because the white man's telling the story. Okay, so actually that's a really great lead into, whose story is this? My biggest takeaway from the book is the person who owns the story, who owns the narrative, is the one everyone's listening to.
Right.
And I think that that's something worth talking about because I think that a lot of people, they'll look at like feminism or any kind of inequality, and I think that they think that, hey, I'm not sexist, I'm not racist, I'm not part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that you're missing a really important step, because if you're not doing anything to help the problem either, and like it sounds like one of the biggest things that you could do is just simply to listen.
Right.
And we're living in this kind of culture right now where everybody wants to have a voice and everybody's really loud online, but nobody's really listening. Everybody's just shouting at each other. And so my biggest takeaway from this is, I guess my own reflection is to start really listening to other stories and putting more value on stories that don't just revolve around, me, a straight, white, girl.
One of my favorite quotes in the first chapter was actually from Chris Evans.
Oh, I wrote that one down. That was my favorite one.
And it was after Matt Damon, he was aligning with the Me Too movement. He was backing them, but his wording, like the fact that him as a man said something, it was not well received. And then Chris Evans said the hardest things to reconcile is that just because you have good intentions doesn't mean it's your time to have a voice. And I was like, Captain America.
I know. That's perfect. I know. I mean, I think that's a prime example, though, because, there's a lot of men out there that I think...
like, they want to help, but they don't know how to, and sometimes they come across as just talking over you.
Yes, because... I think because, somebody who wants to help, they think that they have to explain things or...
mansplain things.
Yeah, it blows my mind that you wouldn't stop to listen. And I think that's the biggest thing. If you want to actually do something and make a difference with some of these issues of inequality, we need to just listen.
One other thing that I found really interesting in that first chapter was the fact that she said non-white people will become the voting majority in 2044.
Oh, I remember that.
She kind of hypothesized that that's why things are kind of at a peak right now with the craziness.
They're losing control.
They're losing control.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
They're like cats that you're trying to grab and hold, but they're just like clawing their way out.
Well, that gets into this whole angry white male thing, which is also a big part of the book. Let's talk about angry white men. Why are white men so angry?
Because they don't want to share the pie.
Yeah.
Do you guys feel like... I don't know. I know a lot of white men. I know a lot...
Yeah, I mean...
I know a lot of white men who are not woke.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe that they just don't get it. Like, I don't think that they realize that they're fighting for this control and this power, I think they're completely oblivious to it, which I think that's a big problem, though, like, if they at least knew that they were doing that, then it'd be a lot easier to be like...
They don't want to be wrong, and they don't want to look stupid, so they're just going to stay the way they are.
Yeah,
determined.
I also think it has a lot to do with guilt. If they actually acknowledge and research subjects and then they find out that they've been wrong or that they've had the wrong understanding or the things that they were taught by people they respect were not in fact true, then there's a lot of guilt behind the actions that they've taken in their lives, and no one likes feeling guilty. So if they yell at you long enough and you give up, then they don't have to do that.
Right, and they don't realize that they can just change their minds and be better, and
it's okay. It's okay to be wrong.
Like when I was in high school, I wrote a paper in my senior year about why abortion is evil, because at the time I truly believed that.
Right. I went through that too.
Yeah. and then I realized that's insane. Why did I write this paper? I hope no one ever reads it ever.
So let me ask you this. So when you wrote that paper, did you know anything about abortion?
No.
Of course not,
Nothing.
because that's what happened.
I had no idea what it was. People were like, oh, it's baby killing. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, it's baby killing. I didn't know anything else because I was a dumb 18-year-old.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the book does talk a lot about abortion, which I do find this interesting that there's so many, like, older men that are who never, for one, never could have a baby, and two, are definitely not in their baby prime season right now, obsessing over having babies. Like, I mean, there's plenty of other things to think about.
There are a lot of men that fit that actually have arranged their lives just to disrupt women from being able to get abortions. In my spare time and on my vacations, I work with a group called Abortion Access Front. It was started by a comedian, and she uses comedy and live performances to educate the public about what abortion really is and why it's important. In this book, she's actually talking about a couple of things that I'm actually very well aware of. They are very current day news, but she talks about this one law in Ohio that has been pushed through by one of the groups that I'm also aware of. They basically, what they do is they write blank legislation. So they'll write all of the words and then leave certain things blank so that legislatures, they meet with them, get them to buy into these bills, and they fill in the blank and then pass it on as their own bill. So the one in Ohio is talking about ectopic pregnancy. And what an ectopic pregnancy is, it's when the egg, the fertilized egg attaches in the fallopian tube or somewhere in that area, but it is going to be a non-viable pregnancy. And if it's not taken care of, either naturally or medically, the woman would die if the tissue is not removed. But it's very, very common. Okay. And most people will get an ectopic pregnancy and not even know it because the body will automatically
flush it out.
Yeah. But in some cases it doesn't, and it does need a medical procedure. But basically in Ohio, they were saying, well, an ectopic pregnancy, what you should do with it, doctor, is you should remove the, I believe they call it an embryo, which is technically not at that point.
Right.
And reimplant it into the uterus, which is a medical impossibility.
Yeah, I don't think it works like that.
It's not like a puzzle piece. It didn't quite fit here, so let's take it out and put it over here. Now what will happen is one of two things. Either the independent clinics will either sue and go to court to have it overturned, or some woman will have to go through it and sue to get it overturned.
Physically, I mean, what's going to happen to the body? Like, if you try to implant it.
Honestly, if they do that and it fails and the body does not flush it out naturally, she could become, she could get an infection.
That's insane.
So then you're talking about other medical complications.
I mean, talk about taking away someone's rights. That's insane. You're just creating
literally a bill that will endanger women.
I mean, that's just pushing it so insanely far because yes, okay, I can't understand, but at least there's a pregnancy and it's it could go through, but this isn't even a pregnancy can go through. It's hey, let's take this freak accident and try and make a baby out of it, even though you didn't have it anyways.
Not only are they making decisions that strip women away from making those decisions themselves, but they're also not talking to doctors or people who are actually know what they're talking about.
She said that in the book too about how they force the doctors into telling women things that aren't medically true, just so that to try and convince them to not have abortions.
Right. So there's actually in a lot of states there's a script. So and in most cases it has to be read by the doctor.
Even if the doctor knows it's bullshit, then
they have to read it.
Yeah.
I've actually seen a doctor and how he addresses it. He knows it's factually incorrect, and he says he's got it in his hands. He's like, I am legally obligated to read this piece of paper to you. Nothing in here is correct. If it is correct, I will say this is correct, but I have to read it all the way through, and then I will answer any questions that you have afterwards. I do not want to read this to you, but I have to. The people who do this do tend to be extremely religious. Not everyone who's religious feels this way. I know lots of Christians who are down for choice, right? It's not their personal choice, but they are not going to stop anyone else. And they do predominantly tend to be men or women married to men who do it. Most of the time, they're homeschooling their children.
So we're isolating, again, something that helps with misinformation.
The ones that I encounter, they do tend to be white Protestant males who have multiple children. I also know that at a lot of times they don't let women speak at their events. I mean, a lot of them make it a family event. So there are children that are in this country that grow up just going to protest outside of clinics.
That's a terrible childhood.
So they think that this is normal then.
They think it's normal.
So that's their cathedral.
That's their cathedral.
Yeah.
They've and a lot of them create their own church. There's a church in Jackson, Mississippi. It's not like your normal church. It's not like a Presbyterian or a Baptist. Like, it's their own church. They started themselves, and they will hold their Saturday service if the clinic is open in the street in front of the clinic.
It's
like,
just a life filled with
If it doesn't look
hate.
like them, if it doesn't talk like them, they're just anti.
Well, again, I mean, they're not listening to anything.
We're living in an age where the truth doesn't matter anymore. The facts don't matter anymore. And I could say that you could take that as far back to, like, the creation of Fox News, because, like, after 10 years of Fox News, I mean, I know they've been around for longer than that, but after, 10 years of them telling everybody that, you're what people are learning in college is wrong, it feeds into this very classic American fear that I can't be wrong about anything. That everything that I knew as a child is true. That I can't. There's a competitive need to say that, like, well, nobody's better than me. And I can, if nobody's better than me, then I can't be wrong.
I mean, it's interesting because, going back to the whole cathedral thing. So, like, when the first time for me that I started to wake up was many years ago now, over 10 years ago, when I moved to New Zealand. And I remember being in the bubble of, just, I mean, we're in the Bible Belt. For anybody watching, we're in Memphis. We're part of the Bible Belt. And I grew up in that. And I remember the first time that I was in New Zealand, somebody said to me, and I thought that the U.S. was, like, the ultimate, like, Christian and goodness. And, like, we're like the way you should be. And I remember somebody told me, you're from the U.S., it's pretty corrupt there, huh? And I was like, what? Because I had no idea. I mean, like, I literally had no idea. And so that was the first time for me that I started to, like, realize, hey, maybe everything that I've been told my entire life isn't necessarily true.
I think a lot of it just goes back to, when you have a major news organization telling everyone that truth and facts are relative, and, people are going to hear that, internalize it, and then that's when you get years later, you get to a point where it's like you've got climate change deniers and stuff, and you could show people that, look at these charts, look at these graphs, look at the ozone, look at the carbon dioxide in there,
concrete evidence,
right? This stuff is really happening. But then you tell somebody who's been grown up on stuff like, truth and facts are relative, and, nobody's better than, nobody is smarter and better than you, and that's because you live in a corporate capitalist society that values the work that you put in, even though it doesn't, but...
Absolutely not.
You get somebody that tries to tell him this, and tell that person that, and then they're like, well, no, I that's not real. My X, Y, and Z, X being maybe my Bible, Y maybe my friend at the bar or something, or Z, a political commentator on the radio, said otherwise.
Right.
And, I trust them over some person teaching at a university that I've never met.
She actually calls it objective reality.
Oh, I like that term.
It just comes down to who people are listening to and who you value. And I think that it's really easy to keep going back to that white male narrative because we're so used to it.
With, like, literature and, like, the books that I read growing up as a kid, a lot of the main characters in these books were male and from a male perspective. And so, I want to be a children's book writer and illustrator, and there's a book that I've had that I've been, like, working on for a while, and my main character was always a boy. And then I had a friend ask me, like, why is your main character a boy? And I was like, I don't know, I guess maybe because I never really thought about it. And then, like, later on, I started to think about why my character had to be a boy. Why couldn't my character be a girl?
Yeah.
And so I changed my character to a girl because of that. But that's just, like, something that, when people talk about it and when people, like, bring it to the table, then you actually think about it and make those changes.
I think one of the things that this book really made me do, I felt like until I really read this book and I was really paying attention, that I had been listening to other people's stories. But then I started thinking, this sounds terrible, but I was going through demographically, like all the people that I know and what I knew about them. And then I realized that there's a lot of demographics missing out of the people that I know. And then I realized, like, I still have so much to learn.
Same.
And I love to talk, and I'm going to have to try not to talk and listen more.
Knowing when you should be silent and listening, and knowing when you should be speaking up, especially when it's someone who's talking over you, like mansplaining. That too, like being aware of when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this a little bit too. Like, I don't want people to start thinking, hey, I'm supposed to just keep my mouth shut and just listen. Because that's also not helpful either. And, you know, I think about that in terms of like, okay, I want to be heard as far as like being a female and you know, experiencing a certain amount of inequality with that. But I don't want men to just sit around and not talk about it. Like, I do want you to talk about it, but I want you to talk in a way of responding. Like, I don't want to hear what you have to say about it. I want to have a conversation.
Questions. Yeah. Asking questions is the best way to listen, right?
It's okay to get a dumb question sometime, at least from someone who's like really trying.
Right. Yeah. One of the other things that she said in the book is that equality keeps everyone accountable.
Right.
And we don't have a very equal society, obviously, and we have people who are just getting away with murder, literally, in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
We have people just getting away with whatever they want, and the fact that there's no accountability for you know, certain demographics, you're just enabling people to do the wrong thing.
I think respectful challenging when you hear things that are incorrect, or if you want someone to consider another point of view. I call it respectful challenging because when you outright just challenge someone, they feel threatened. But if you respectfully ask questions and challenge what they've just said to either correct based on known facts or to get them to consider someone else's point of view, you can have a very healthy like a very healthy exchange and conversation, and both probably come away smarter.
So I think it's a really interesting pairing, this book with Cinderella Liberator, because stories shape the way that we think about ourselves and our lives. And I think that a lot of the stories that we probably read as children have shaped, obviously fairy tales, like, women in general believe that, or how, you grow up thinking that someone's going to come save you. By reshaping some of these older, fairy tales, I think it's kind of creating the world that you want to live in. So it's almost like creating your own cathedral. And I think that was really, really smart. Let's talk about the stepsisters.
Paloma and Perlita.
They wanted happiness, and they thought that happiness came from different things.
But they were conditioned as children by their mother that in order to be happy and in order to be successful in life, they had to be beautiful, and they had to be rich, and they had to have a handsome, rich husband. And so they just thought, I guess that's what I have to do. And then they had really no choice in how they lived their lifestyle, because their mom was always, okay, you have to go to this ball. You can't go outside because you'll damage your skin. You have to stay inside and just dress up and do your hair. And so they're like, I guess I don't have a choice. I guess this is my life now. They didn't know that there was another option. And so that's how they live their life.
And I like that because it lifts off this whole like villainous thing, like you are just bad. But then also the stepmother was a little bit different too. Like, and I like that. I'm a stepmother. It does kind of suck how stepmothers are villainized and everything to the point where they're just like evil, like the evil stepmother. And it's like, this one, she wasn't really evil. Like, she was greedy.
And she was very controlling. Like, she didn't give either of her daughters, including her stepdaughter, a choice in what they could do with their lives. She just put them in these, like, roles, and they were stuck there.
I could definitely appreciate a message in a children's story that, it's not really all... It's not about beauty. It's about finding what you love to do and then doing that.
And that's what all the characters did in the end. Kind of jumping ahead, that the stepsisters, one of them opened a dress shop and somebody else opened a hair salon
Yeah.
because that's what they loved, and they found that by doing something they got more enjoyment out of it than just having.
Yeah, and then they
yeah.
made up with Cinderella.
Yeah.
Which was cool.
It was
I
cool
like that.
because it's like, again, not villainizing, people and just being like, you're bad, you must be punished. It's like, hey, let's redirect.
So what did the stepmother do?
She became the wind. Actually,
It was very.
That was a little weird.
So like the
I
stepmother.
was like, what happened to her? It was
She
like,
became basically like the north wind. Like she's just the wind
And she
that
comes and
howls,
bangs on the
and
door.
She's like, mine, 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 gimme, gimme, gimme.
In my first reading of it, I
She's
interpreted it as she died.
Well, that
And
I
became
was
like a
the only
spirit
way
in the
that she
wind.
could become the wind is if
Became a
she's like
poltergeist.
dead. But like they also like were like but we all have that howling in our hearts. Like we're not all. We can all be liberators, like they called Cinderella Liberator because she helped children and like she was a good person. But we're liberators, but sometimes we have stepmother tendencies.
Would you say that the story had kind of like an anti-consumerism message?
Oh,
to it?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that
Yeah.
was really interesting for a children's book. It was like,
Yeah.
That's great though.
Yeah,
Let's get rid of this.
right.
please.
You don't have to just
have.
want, have, take.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah.
And like maybe you could be like Cinderella does in the last 2 pages of the story, where it's like you just have a home business and you bake cakes
Yeah,
and you
she has
meet
her own
people
bakery and
So that's what she
And-
did. She became a cake maker.
yeah. and
Okay,
then-
so she doesn't marry the prince?
She doesn't marry the prince because they were
become good friends.
kids.
Yeah.
For
They were
one.
just children. They were too young, and they would never get married.
And they
just
only wanted
weren't-
to be friends.
They weren't compatible.
yeah, that was cool.
Yeah.
And
But
the
it's like-
prince named Prince Nevermind.
It was just so much better than Prince Charming. It's like, never mind.
Prince
Yeah, that was
Nevermind.
pretty great.
He was always cooped up in the castle too. Like he grew up thinking that he was only destined to be a prince or become king eventually, and like he wasn't allowed to go outside by himself. Like his life was pretty much dictated. And so he was like, I don't want to be this. I want to get dirty. I want to grow things. I want to make things. I want to be around people and have friends. And so he became a farmer prince. So he was a farmer, and he helped and worked with farmers.
And he also said that he felt very uncomfortable with having so much when other people had so
Right.
little.
Right.
And I mean, yeah, it's
He
totally.
saw the
yeah.
huge
That's really cool.
difference in his lifestyle versus his other people's lifestyles.
And then he went out and helped people, just like Cinderella did,
Yeah.
which was really cool. Prince Nevermind said, "Well, I don't want to be this prince anymore. I want to be my own person. I want to be on a level playing field with everyone. I want to help people, and I don't have to be what I was born to be."
Basically, like the overarching moral of the story, it's not just about feminism. It's just about being a liberator and giving people the choice to be themselves and be who they want to be, and not have to stay in this bubble that, like the cathedral that you mentioned, that was in this book, like kind of breaking those cycles. And also they made a point at the end of the story that, you don't have to be evil like your parents. I mean, it doesn't matter if your parents were bad parents or good parents, or if your parent was a pirate, because Cinderella's mom was a ship captain who got lost at sea, and her father was a judge who just never came back.
I wanted to ask what you thought about that, or what y'all thought about that, because
He will come back eventually.
he's going to come back eventually. That's what it says at
Cinderella's
the end
father
of
is
the
the
book.
questionable one. Like he just
gone.
his first wife just disappeared at sea, and then he got remarried to this questionable lady, and then
Right.
left his daughter in the hands of this woman he just met, and to do judge stuff. I guess judges travel.
Judge
I don't
traveling,
know.
judge traveling.
He's a
I don't know.
traveling judge, and then he never came back. And
Yeah,
he just,
that was-
that's
Where
like,
is he?
where did he go?
I kept-
But the
I-
mom came back. She eventually came back and was so proud of her daughter.
That is interesting.
But
Yeah.
I love. What about the animals? Though?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to talk
Animals.
about.
Okay, animals. I
The
love
animals
animals. Tell
are
me about 'em.
liberated too.
They're liberated.
Yeah, well, first of all, we had coach women and
foot women.
a
coach
coach
woman and
yeah.
a foot women.
And the animals, I mean, it's the same thing. We had the horses and all that. But at the end, I thought it was great because they were like, would you like to stay this or would you like to go back? And they thought about it and they were like, well, I've got my little mice at home or,
Yeah.
And then some of them were like, I've done all my stuff. Like I've lived my life. My kids are grown. I want to stay you know, what was it?
A coach woman.
Yeah, the coach woman.
The
I'm gonna go
rat.
have some adventures.
Yeah, the rat decided to stay a coach woman, and then 5 of the 6 horses decided to stay horses. They were mice originally.
Okay.
And then one of them went back to their kids. And then the lizards what were the lizards? The foot women. They were like, we like being lizards.
And they talked about beauty, like all kinds of beauty. Like some people like, you know, round bodies. Some people like tiny bodies, or what were the other ones? Like
some people
jet black
are so in love with you, they don't care what you look like.
That was my favorite one. Like love is just love. It just looks like love.
In the original Cinderella, the stepsisters would cut off part of their feet so they could fit it into the glass slippers.
The stepsisters' feet in the original are supposed to be really big and not
big
fit,
and like,
but in this one they were smaller because they didn't do anything, and they didn't have nice big, you know, strong feet like Cinderella.
Were like big, strong.
You know what? I'll admit I've always had big feet because I'm tall. I'm 6 foot, so I've got size 11s. So, like, growing up, knowing that my foot was always bigger than everyone else's, I was like, I would never be Cinderella because my feet would never fit in that shoe.
You need the Cinderella.
The Cinderella has strong feet.
So, really, 2 great books just about choice and being liberated and all these wonderful things. Like, I felt really good reading it. What about you guys?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I did too. I really enjoyed the book, and I want to read the Cinderella Liberator now.
So, all of you. Also, if you guys read the book or you want to read the book, grab a copy, and we'd love to talk to you guys about it more. So, leave us a comment in the comment section of the video. I mean, I think you'll get something out of it. I think it was liberating.
Yeah.
Yes. So, if you'd like to join us for the next episode, we always read the books that are chosen by our shared shelf on Goodreads. So, join with them. It's really great. And we all learn a lot and hopefully change the world and make it better. Thank you guys for joining us. Thanks
you.
For having me. Yay. Yeah. And we will see you next time.